My name is Marlene Greaves, and I am 63 years old. There is nothing particularly remarkable about the number 63. It is not a milestone that earns you a special card or a themed party. It isn't a round, satisfying number. It simply sounds a little tired, like a porch step that has borne a great deal of weight and has earned its quiet sag. I spend most of my mornings in the same unvarying ritual: a cup of black coffee, the newspaper's crossword puzzle, and the rhythmic, companionable creak of the wicker porch swing beneath me. From this perch, I watch the sun climb over the rooftops of my quiet suburban street, and I contemplate my front lawn, a stubborn patch of earth that refuses to turn a vibrant green no matter how much water or hope I pour into it. It is a peaceful existence, comfortable in the particular way of solitude that I have grown accustomed to, especially in the 3 years since my son, Ezra, stopped speaking to me. This morning, however, the rhythm was broken. A single, solid knock echoed from the front door. It wasn't the impatient rap of the mail carrier or the hesitant tap of a neighborhood child selling fundraiser coupons. It was just one knock, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps on the stone walkway. I waited a moment, listening to the silence that rushed back in, before I set my coffee cup down and went to the door. I opened it to find a box resting on the welcome mat. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, the seams taped with a neatness that bordered on obsessive. A single strand of thin, cerulean blue ribbon was tied once around its middle, a simple, unadorned knot. There was no mistaking the handwriting on the small, affixed tag. I hadn't seen it in 3 years, but I would have recognized it with my eyes closed. Ezra wrote the way an architect draws a blueprint, precise, with no wasted curves, always in blue ink. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, my bare feet cool against the worn fibers of the mat, staring at the tidy, block letters that spelled out my name, Marlene Greaves. I whispered my own name under my breath, as if hearing it in the echo of his script might make it sound different, might bridge the chasm of silence between us. Back inside, I placed the package on the kitchen table, where it sat like an uninvited guest. My coffee had gone cold. I warmed it in the microwave and sat down opposite the box, my hands clasped in my lap as if I were in a waiting room, about to be called in for a verdict. 3 years of absolute silence. Not a card when I had pneumonia and spent a week in the hospital. Not a word when my sister, his Aunt Carol, passed away from cancer. And now this? Finally, after a long and silent debate with myself, curiosity won. My fingers, fumbling slightly, untied the ribbon and tore away the paper. Inside was a plain white bakery box, and nestled within its tissue-lined interior, as if they were fragile jewels, were cookies. Dozens of them. They were intricately decorated, each one a small, edible work of art. There were flowers with delicate blue petals, leaves painted with shimmering gold dust, and stars coated in a fine, sparkling sugar. They were clearly handmade, a fact that struck me as profoundly strange. Ezra had never baked a day in his life. There was no note, no letter explaining the sudden offering. Just a small card, the size of a business card, tucked into the inside of the lid. It read, in that same precise, blue ink, "Happy birthday, Mom." Let's start over. I held the card between my thumb and forefinger, staring at it as if it might dissolve if I blinked. A tightness formed in my throat. It wasn't a sob, not exactly. It was the dull, familiar ache that comes when you want something to be true so badly that you can't yet bring yourself to trust it. I looked back at the cookies, at their perfect, cheerful faces. I should have felt joy, or at least a flicker of hope. Instead, a wave of something else washed over me, a cool, unsettling caution. I did not eat one. I wanted to. The sweet, buttery scent filled the kitchen, a siren song of reconciliation. But I could not bring myself to do it. Perhaps it was pride, a stubborn refusal to accept an apology that came without an explanation for the wound. Perhaps it was fear, the trepidation of a burn victim approaching a flame. Or perhaps it was something quieter, a whisper of intuition from a place deep within me that I couldn't name, but had learned not to ignore. I carefully selected one of the cookies, a simple, star-shaped one, and placed it in a small, airtight container. I sealed the lid and put it in the refrigerator, a strange impulse to preserve this single piece of the offering. The rest, I packed back into their box, retying the blue ribbon as best I could. Ruth Langford, Ezra's mother-in-law, lived only a 15-minute drive away. She had always been kind to me, a beacon of gentle warmth, especially after Ezra had grown so distant. She sent casseroles when I was sick and called just to chat, never mentioning the rift, but always making it clear that I was still family in her eyes. I thought if anyone deserved something sweet, something beautiful, it was her. and giving them away felt easier, safer, than sitting alone with them and wondering what they truly meant. I drove over that afternoon. The sun was low enough in the sky to cast a soft, orange light through the trees, and the wind chimes on her porch were dancing a gentle melody. I presented her with the box, smiling and brushing off her initial polite refusals. "Oh, Marlene, you shouldn't have," she'd said, her eyes lighting up as she opened the lid. "My goodness, these are exquisite. Did you make them?" "A surprise gift," I said, the words feeling true enough. "I just wanted to share them." Seeing her genuine delight, I felt a small measure of relief. It felt good to turn this complicated gesture into a simple act of kindness. Later, back home, I stood in my kitchen doorway, looking at the empty space on the table where the package had been. I tried not to feel the profound sense of relief that washed over me now that it was gone. The next morning, just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee, the phone rang. The sound startled me. It had been a long time since anyone called that early, and an even longer time since that particular number had flashed across the caller ID screen. Ezra. I let it ring 3 times, my hand hovering over the phone as if it might burn me. On the 4th ring, just before it would have gone to voicemail, I answered. "Hello." My voice was tight. "Hi, Mom." His voice, smooth and casual, slid across the line as if no time had passed at all. As if 3 years of silence hadn't settled between us like a thick layer of sediment. "Happy birthday." "A little late, I know." "Ezra." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, gripping my warm mug with both hands. "I got your package." "Yeah." A soft chuckle. "I wasn't sure you would." "To be honest, I wasn't sure you'd open it." "I opened it," I confirmed. "It was a surprise." There was a beat of silence. Then he asked, a little too casually, "So, how were they?" "The cookies." I took a breath, the air feeling thin in my lungs. "Oh, I didn't have any. I gave them to Ruth." The line went completely, utterly still. For a second, I pulled the phone away from my ear to check if the call had dropped. It hadn't. "You gave them to Ruth?" His voice was different now. The warmth had vanished, replaced by something sharp and cold, like splintered ice. "Yes," I said slowly, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "She's always had such a sweet tooth." And I didn't know what to do with them. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I could hear his breathing, strained and uneven. Then, softly at first, but with a gathering force that made my blood run cold, he spoke a single question. "What did you do?" The words hit me like a slap. I blinked, stunned by the sudden, raw venom in his voice. "Ezra, what's wrong?" "They weren't for her," he snapped. "They were for you. Only you." His voice cracked, not with sadness, but with something else entirely. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated frustration, bordering on panic. I sat frozen, the coffee growing cold in my hands, my mind struggling to catch up. "I didn't know," I managed to say, my own voice small. "Right. Of course you didn't." The bitterness that dripped from his words was thick and suffocating. "You never do." He hung up before I could say another word. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, loud and alien in the quiet of my kitchen. I slowly lowered the phone to the table, staring at the wood grain. My heart was pounding, not fast, but with deep, heavy thuds, as if it wanted to be heard. "Only you." That's what he had said. I stood up, walked to the refrigerator, and opened the door. The small, sealed container was still there, holding its single, perfect, untouched cookie. I closed the door and leaned against the counter, a sudden chill creeping over my skin despite the warmth of the room. That's when the other phone rang, the old landline in the hallway. Almost no one used that phone anymore. I walked towards it, a sense of dread already blooming in my chest. The receiver crackled with static as I picked it up, as if it had forgotten how to transmit a voice. "Marlene." It was Leah, Ezra's wife. Her voice was stretched thin, trembling with anxiety. "Leah? What is it?" "It's Ruth," she said, her voice catching. "She's in the hospital." My legs gave out from under me, and I sank onto the small telephone bench without meaning to. "What happened?" "She collapsed this morning. She was vomiting, disoriented." "I thought it was the flu, but it's worse." "She can't stand up, she's confused. The ER says they can't find anything specific. They're running tests." My mouth went dry. "Did she eat anything unusual?" I asked, my voice a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the muted chaos of a hospital in the background, the beep of a machine, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, the rattle of a passing cart. She mentioned cookies," Leah finally said, her voice hesitant. "She said you brought them over." "I did," I breathed. I gave her the box Ezra sent me. Leia said nothing. The silence was heavy with unspoken questions. Do you think, could they have made her sick? She finally asked, the question hanging between us, fragile and terrifying. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. I don't know. I didn't eat any. Another pause, this one even longer. Marlene, if you think of anything at all, will you tell me? Yes, I whispered. Of course. We hung up, and I sat there in the dim light of the hallway, staring at the wall. The morning sun had passed over the house, leaving the living room in a state of gray shadow. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't move for a very long time. Later, as evening began to settle, I wandered back into the kitchen, driven by the aimless instinct of someone seeking order in the face of chaos. I began to clean, wiping down already clean surfaces, folding dish towels that didn't need folding. My hands needed something to do, some simple, repetitive task to anchor my racing thoughts. I opened the lid of the kitchen bin to empty it, and my eyes caught on something near the bottom, half hidden beneath a crumpled newspaper. It was a small, clear plastic bottle, the kind that might hold vitamins or supplements. There was no label, just a faint, chalky ring of white powder clinging to the inside. I reached in and picked it out, turning it over and over in my hand. It wasn't mine. I had never seen it before. The cap was still screwed on tightly. Who could have put it in my trash? The only visitor I'd had in days was, but that was impossible. The mail carrier had knocked. I'd seen footsteps retreating. But had I seen a face? No. It could have been anyone. It could have been Ezra. My gaze drifted to the refrigerator. The cookie was still inside, nestled in its little plastic box like a time bomb, waiting. My hand trembled as I took it out. I couldn't even remember why I had saved it. A little treat for later, perhaps. A small, kind gesture to myself. Now, I couldn't look at it without a wave of nausea. I took the cookie and the empty bottle into my small home office and set them on the desk. The beam of the desk lamp made the sugar crystals glitter with a sinister beauty. I sat down and folded my hands, staring at the two objects as if they might confess their secrets. Was I the target? Was this meant for me? The questions hung in the air, too monstrous to touch. Then, just before I went to bed, I made a call. I called a woman named Janelle Marrow, a toxicologist who worked at a private lab downtown. We weren't close friends, but our husbands had worked together for years, and I had once helped her daughter get a coveted summer internship. She owed me a favor. I didn't say much, just that I needed something tested, quietly. She told me she could meet me in the morning. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of the room for a long time before turning out the lights. In the profound quiet of my house, I could still hear Ezra's voice in my head, sharp with a terrifying anger. What did you do? The cookie stayed in the refrigerator that night. So did the fear. The lab was tucked away in a nondescript medical office complex on the edge of town, the kind of place you would never notice unless you were looking for it. Janelle met me in the parking lot herself, her white lab coat looking jarringly crisp in the early morning light. She didn't ask too many questions, just raised a single, questioning eyebrow when I handed her the sealed container with the cookie and the small plastic bag holding the empty bottle. Is this the kind of favor I'm going to regret asking about, Marlene? She asked gently. I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't cooperate. Just tell me what's in it, Janelle. Please. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and disappeared back through a side door. I sat in my car with the engine off and the radio silent. My hands were ice cold. I didn't drive away. I couldn't. My mind, unbidden, began to drift backwards, sifting through memories of Ezra's childhood like an archaeologist brushing dust from old bones. I saw Ezra at 8, folding the dinner napkins into precise geometric shapes, his small face a mask of concentration. I saw him at 10, his body rigid with silent fury when I rearranged the pantry, organizing cans by color instead of by size. I saw him at 12, refusing to speak to me for an entire week after I forgot to buy the specific brand of ketchup he insisted on for his sandwiches. Back then, I had called them quirks. I told myself he was particular, sensitive. He was academically brilliant, impeccably behaved in public, a model child on paper. But I also remembered other things now, things I had pushed aside. The way he used to watch people eat, a strange, analytical look in his eyes. The way he watched me. I remembered the time I'd accidentally baked cookies with walnuts. He was allergic, and he'd spat his bite into the trash, then scrubbed at his mouth with a napkin until his lips were raw. It wasn't the reaction of a child in fear of an allergic reaction. It was a reaction of pure, controlled rage at the mistake. I remembered the way he would go completely still when he was disappointed, a terrifying quietness, as if he were carefully packing the slide away to be used later. A nurse from the hospital called mid-morning. Ruth's condition hadn't improved. They were moving her from the observation unit to internal medicine. There was still no diagnosis. No one mentioned the cookies, and I didn't volunteer the information. Not yet. I sat in my kitchen, waiting for Janelle's call, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea I wasn't drinking. The mug grew cold against my palms. The house creaked around me as if it, too, were listening. Ezra had always been good at playing the long game. He didn't have explosive tantrums like other children. He planned. He held on to things. You could almost see him take in a slate, file it away in some mental cabinet, only to bring it out later, sharpened to a fine point. When the phone finally rang just after noon, the sound made me jump. "Marlene, it's Janelle," she said, her voice stripped of its earlier casualness. It was all business now. We ran the standard panels. Nothing. Then, on a hunch, I had my team dig a little deeper. I held my breath. "There's something in the cookie, Marlene," she said, her voice low. "And in the residue from the bottle. Traces of a compound derived from oleander. It's a cardiac glycoside. Potent. It's highly toxic. It's almost never found in a food product. This was no accident." I closed my eyes, the world tilting slightly. "You said someone ate these," Janelle continued, a new, cautious tone in her voice. I couldn't answer her. My throat had closed up. She hesitated. "Marlene, the results are what they are. I'm required by protocol to report findings like this. But I can write up the report discreetly. I'll just log the sample as anonymous for now. It will give you some time." "Thank you, Janelle," I managed to whisper. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a very long time. My son had sent me poison in a gift-wrapped box. A box I had given away as casually as if it were a tin of fruitcake. Late that evening, I found myself pacing the front walk again, back and forth, the cool night air doing nothing to calm the fire in my veins. The sun was gone, the sky a deep, bruised purple. The wind carried the faint, sweet scent of a neighbor's blooming jasmine, or maybe it was just a memory. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. A number I didn't recognize. I answered, my heart hammering against my ribs. The voice on the other end was calm, firm, and unfamiliar. "This is Detective Fallon Reyes. Am I speaking with Marlene Greaves?" I hesitated, a primal urge to deny everything, to retreat back into my quiet, lonely life, warring with a new, cold clarity. "Yes. I was given your name by Dr. Janelle Marrow at the Sterling Diagnostic Lab," he said. "She informed me that you requested a toxicology analysis on a food item and instructed that any alarming results be forwarded to the proper authorities. Is that correct?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to claim some terrible misunderstanding, to protect the last shattered pieces of what had once been my family. But I heard my own voice, distant and steady, say yes. "That's correct." There was a pause on his end, professional but not unkind. "Mrs. Greaves, would you be willing to meet with me to discuss the results and your concerns?" I agreed, but it felt like signing a document from which there was no return. We met the following afternoon in a small, sterile office tucked away at the back of the police station. There was nothing dramatic about it. Detective Reyes looked younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He offered me a bottle of water, which I declined. My hands wouldn't stay still, folding and unfolding a tissue I hadn't realized I was holding. He started gently, asking me about my relationship with Ezra. How long we had been estranged, how often we spoke before that, when I received the package, what it contained, how Ruth Langford had come into the picture. I answered every question with the clearest possible precision, steering a wide berth around the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. He listened intently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, never interrupting. Then he moved to the harder questions. "Mrs. Greaves, do you believe your son intended to harm you?" I looked down at my trembling hands. "I don't want to believe that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But the cookie had poison in it. Ruth didn't bake it." "I didn't bake it. He sent it. And the bottle I found in my trash, it wasn't mine." "The timing is suggestive," he conceded. "Is there any reason he would want to harm you? A financial motive? An old family grievance?" I flinched. The question felt both enormous and impossibly petty. "He resents me," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I think he always has. He blames me for things I couldn't fix. For not being the mother he thought he needed. Detective Reyes nodded slowly, but I could see the professional skepticism in his eyes. All I had was a poisoned cookie I hadn't eaten, an empty bottle from my trash can, and a gut feeling. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no confession. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Are you willing to submit the cookie and the bottle as evidence? To allow us to open a formal investigation? I hesitated. The word yes felt like the ultimate betrayal, even though I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Ezra had acted first. Yes, I finally said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. If there is any chance that he has done this before, or that he would do it again, I can't ignore it. He nodded once and stood, signaling the end of our meeting. We'll log the items and keep you informed. If anything changes on your end, or if you remember anything else, please call me directly. As I walked out of the police station, the sky was beginning to bruise with the colors of sunset. I got into my car, locked the doors out of habit, and sat for a long time with my hands resting on the steering wheel. It wasn't guilt I felt. It was something older, deeper. The knowledge that a mother's love doesn't simply end because the child has changed into someone unrecognizable. The part of me that had once packed Ezra's school lunches and kissed his scraped knees now sat in stunned, silent grief, trying to understand how the boy I raised had become a man who would send me death wrapped in a blue ribbon. That night, I didn't sleep. I left the hallway light on, its pale glow a weak defense against the shadows. Every creak of the old house had me sitting bolt upright, listening. By morning, I had made a decision. If he didn't want me to know what he was capable of, he should have been more careful. I would go to him, not as his mother, but as the woman he had so badly underestimated. And I would bring a recording device. Ezra opened the door with a strained smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. He looked thinner than I remembered, as if something inside him were slowly being hollowed out. Mom, he said, stepping aside. This is a surprise. I forced a tight smile of my own. I heard about Ruth. I wanted to stop by, see how you were doing. He nodded, gesturing for me to come in. She's still at St. Luke's. Leia is with her. They think it's some kind of stomach virus. I nodded as if I believed him. The phone in my coat pocket, set to record, felt heavy as a stone. His kitchen was as immaculate as ever, a place where everything had its place, down to the precise angle of the knife block. I kept my tone light. I'm sorry we got cut off the other day, I said. The cookies were lovely, Ezra. Truly. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something, curiosity, suspicion, in his eyes. Really? I looked him straight in the face. I didn't try one, of course. But Ruth was just delighted. She said the little star-shaped one was her absolute favorite. And there it was. The briefest slip. It was barely a pause, but it was enough. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, and his voice, when he spoke, was dangerously soft. Ruth picked the stars. I had never said which shape she ate, only that she liked one. Yes, I said slowly, letting the silence hang in the air. She mentioned it. He turned to the sink, busying himself with rinsing a glass that was already clean. She always did like pretty things. More concerned with the surface than what's underneath. I studied the rigid line of his back. You never told me you'd taken up baking. He laughed, but the sound was hollow. A new hobby. It's a good way to relax. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I took a breath and took the leap. Where did you learn to work with oleander? He froze. It wasn't a dramatic, obvious movement. But something shifted in the set of his spine. A stillness that told me he was calculating, deciding on his next move. I don't know what that is, he said, a little too quickly. Dr. Marrow did, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. I took one of the cookies to Janelle. She ran tests. It was laced with it, Ezra. He set the glass down with painstaking care. Mom, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, he said, turning to face me, his expression a mask of cool indignation. But accusations like that, they don't end well. Especially without proof. I think you've given me enough, I said softly. You told me yourself. Only I was supposed to eat them. He stared at me for a long, silent moment. His face didn't move, but I could see something shifting behind his eyes, a cold, frantic calculation. You always did misunderstand me, he said, his voice flat. No, I said, a profound and terrible sadness settling over me. I think, for the very first time, I'm understanding you perfectly. I reached for my purse, keeping my hands steady by sheer force of will. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught on the counter behind him. There, partially obscured by a neatly folded dish towel, was another small, clear plastic bottle, identical in shape to the one I had found in my own trash. Ezra saw my gaze land on it. He moved, casually, to block the view, as if he were simply stretching. "I should go," I said. "I've taken up enough of your time." "Give my love to Ruth," he said, his voice once again smooth as glass. I walked out into the cool afternoon air, every nerve in my body screaming. The phone in my coat pocket was still recording. I didn't stop it until I was back in my car, doors locked, engine running. I emailed the audio file to Detective Reyes before I could second-guess myself. And then I drove straight to St. Luke's. Ruth was still unconscious. Leah was sitting by her bedside, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. I told her what I had to do. I told her everything. By the time I left, the sun had set, and the sky was heavy with unshed rain. That night, I slept on the sofa in the living room with the hallway light on, my phone on the cushion beside me. I didn't close my eyes for more than a few minutes at a time. When it finally rang at 3:17 a.m., I wasn't startled. I was ready. Detective Reyes called just after sunrise. The audio file was enough. Coupled with the toxicology results from Ruth's medical file, it gave them the probable cause they needed for a search warrant. Ezra was arrested before noon. He was quiet, I was told, and calm, as if he had rehearsed this moment. I did not go to the station. There was nothing left to say. Ruth woke up slowly over the next few days. She was confused at first, then grateful to be alive, and then a deep, knowing quiet settled over her. I sat with her when Leah couldn't. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. One afternoon, as I held her hand, I simply said, "I'm so sorry, Ruth." She squeezed my hand once, a faint pressure. It was enough. Leah cried in my kitchen that weekend. She told me she should have known something was wrong. Ezra had grown so secretive, so strange. She'd found odd notes in his journals, vials of dried herbs she didn't recognize. She thought he was just coping with something. It turned out Ezra had been writing under a pseudonym on esoteric herbalist forums for years, detailed descriptions of extracts, dosages, interactions, academic in tone, but chilling in retrospect. Some of the terminology was a precise match for what was found in Ruth's blood work. It all came back to a single decision, to one cookie I didn't eat. I took the small container out of the refrigerator on a quiet Tuesday morning. The cookie was still pristine, though the icing had lost some of its sheen. Detective Reyes had given it back to me in a sealed evidence bag the day Ezra was arrested, in case I wanted it. Not for evidence, he'd said gently, but for clarity. I slid the cookie into the bag and pressed the seal closed. It felt heavier than it looked. That night, I cleared out a small, fireproof lockbox in the back of my hall closet and placed the cookie inside. Next to it, I added the small card that had come with the package. "Happy birthday, Mom. Let's start over." I locked the box and placed it on the highest shelf, not to be forgotten, but to remember what I had so narrowly escaped and what I had been forced to do. I stood in my kitchen for a long time afterward. The house was quiet around me, the air still and calm. And as I turned out the lights and walked down the hall, I knew the quiet had changed. It was no longer the sound of loneliness. It was the sound of a hard-won, sorrowful peace. I wasn't sure if I would ever feel truly safe again, or if, perhaps, I never really had been.